In 1897, farmer Alexander Hamilton from the small town of Leroy, Kansas, witnessed an event that changed the way many residents of the county viewed the natural world. On that spring night, a strange flying machine equipped with bright lights and an unprecedented mechanism hovered over his cattle pen and attempted to abduct a young calf. What happened that night was documented not only by the farmer himself, but also by several neighbors who signed the incident report. Alexander Hamilton was a respected man in the community. His farm was located about 3 miles northwest of Leroy, a small town with a population of about 800. The land there was fertile and hilly, with extensive pastures where Hereford cattle and several horses grazed. Hamilton ran the farm with his son Wall and a tenant named Gideon Heslip. The 3 men shared the responsibilities. Alexander was in charge of general management and livestock sales. Wall was responsible for repairing fences and building barns, and Heslip looked after the animals' health and hay harvesting for the winter. April 1897 was cool. The nights were especially cold for that time of year, with temperatures dropping to near freezing, and farmers feared late frosts that could destroy the wheat crops. Hamilton went to bed around 10 o'clock that evening as usual. His house was a 2-story wooden structure with a sloping roof and a south-facing porch. The bedroom windows faced east, toward a large cattle pen surrounded by a wooden fence about 5 feet high. Around midnight, Alexander was awakened by a strange sound. At first, he thought it was the wind whistling through the cracks in the barn, but the sound was unlike the usual wind. It was a low, vibrating hum, as if someone were turning a huge wheel with a faulty bearing. Hamilton propped himself up on his elbow and listened. The humming didn't stop. It grew louder and quieter, but it never disappeared completely. It was mixed with another sound, the anxious mooing of cows in the pen. The farmer got out of bed, threw on his pants and shirt, grabbed the kerosene lamp from the table and went downstairs. The house was quiet. His son and tenant were sleeping in their rooms on the first floor. Hamilton decided not to wake them right away, choosing first to find out what was going on. He opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. It was a moonless but starry night. The air was cold and damp, smelling of fresh grass and manure. The rumbling grew louder. It was coming from somewhere above, from the direction of the corral. Hamilton raised his lamp and peered into the darkness. What he saw made him freeze in his tracks. Above the corral, about 30 feet up, some kind of object was suspended in the air. It was cigar-shaped, about 300 feet long, and glowed with a soft reddish light. Bright lights flickered on either side of the object, arranged in a row, 6 or 7 on each side. The light they emitted was unnaturally white and cold, unlike the light from kerosene lamps or torches. The object slowly rotated around its axis, and the hum came from it, as if some kind of mechanism was working inside. The farmer took a step back, clutching the lamp to his chest. His heart was pounding. He had never seen anything like this in his life. The object hung motionless in the air as if held by invisible ropes. Hamilton wanted to scream, to call his son and Heslip, but his throat was constricted with fear. He stood on the porch, unable to take his eyes off the hovering device. The cows in the pen were rushing about and mooing. Hamilton recognized among them a young red heifer that had been born last spring. The animal was thrashing around in the far corner of the pen, trying to break through the fence. The other cows huddled together on the opposite side, pressing close to each other. Their eyes reflected the light from the lanterns on the object, and it looked eerie. Dozens of glowing dots in the darkness. Suddenly, a rope or cable began to descend from the bottom of the object. It was bright red and glowed in the dark with its own light like red-hot metal. The rope moved smoothly, writhing in the air as if it were alive. Hamilton watched as it descended lower and lower, approaching the pen. It was at least 40 feet long. At the end of the rope, Alexander could make out some kind of device, perhaps a hook or a loop, but it was impossible to see clearly in the dark. The girl continued to struggle at the fence, but the cable moved purposefully toward her. Hamilton finally found his voice and shouted. He shouted at the top of his lungs, waving the lamp. The light from the kerosene lamp was laughably weak compared to the bright lights on the hanging apparatus, but the farmer hoped to somehow scare or distract whatever was controlling the machine. His screams woke Wall and Heslip. Within seconds, both of them were out on the porch, buttoning their shirts as they ran. Hamilton's son was a tall young man of 22, with broad shoulders and strong blacksmith's hands. Heslip was older, around 40, wiry and short with a dark mustache. Both froze when they saw the hovering object. Wall cursed softly. Heslip crossed himself and muttered something indistinct. Alexander pointed to the pen. The red rope had already reached the ground. It writhed between the fence boards as if searching for something. The heifer backed into a corner, pressing herself against the post. The other cows huddled even closer together, some lying down on the ground, pressing their heads against the grass. The rope found the heifer. It wrapped around her neck with the speed of a boa constrictor squeezing its prey. The animal let out a piercing cry, the kind of sound cows make only when they are about to die. Hamilton and his assistants rushed to the pen. Alexander was still holding the lamp. Wall grabbed the axe leaning against the wall of the house, and Heslop snatched a pitchfork from the haystack by the porch. They reached the pen in less than a minute, but by that time, the red rope had already begun to rise. The heifer was rearing up, her front legs off the ground. She was jerking and shaking her head, trying to free herself, but the rope did not slacken. Hamilton climbed over the fence first. Wall and Heslop followed him. The other cows scattered, clearing the way for them. Wall raised his axe and swung at the rope, but Alexander grabbed his arm. The farmer was afraid that the axe blow might damage the heifer's neck, or that the red rope might be live and electrocute his son. He had once seen a man killed by lightning, and it was similar. A red glow, the smell of ozone in the air. Heslop tried to hook the cable with a pitchfork and pull it down, but the metal wouldn't budge. The cable was hot. The tenant pulled his hand away, burning himself. The heifer was rising higher and higher. Her hind legs were off the ground. The animal struggled in the air, but the cable held her tight. Hamilton grabbed the heifer's hind legs, trying to hold her weight, but the pull from above was too strong. The farmer was a big man, weighing about 200 pounds, but it was as if he wasn't there. The cable pulled the cow upward with relentless force. Suddenly, the rope caught on the top rail of the fence. The heifer hung in the air about 8 feet high, half over the fence, half over the pen. The red rope got tangled in the boards, tightened, and the lift stopped. The object above made a louder hum, as if straining. The rope jerked, trying to free itself, but the crossbar held. Hamilton yelled at Wall to chop the fence boards, not the rope. His son understood and began to strike the crossbar furiously with an axe. The wood was old and dry, and after a few blows, it cracked. Heslop helped by pushing the boards with his hands. Alexander was still holding the heifer's legs, but the animal was barely moving. Its breathing was raspy. Its neck stretched under the pressure of the rope. The crossbar gave way and broke with a loud crack. The rope jerked upward, dragging the heifer into the sky. Hamilton lost his balance and fell to the ground. Wall and Heslop jumped aside, dropping the axe and pitchfork. The heifer rose toward the object faster and faster. In a few seconds, she reached the bottom of the craft and was swallowed up by darkness. Either a hatch opened inside the object, or the animal was pulled into some kind of opening. The red cable disappeared after her. The hum grew louder. The object began to slowly shift to the side, moving northwest. The lights on its sides flashed several times, as if signaling, and then the craft began to gain altitude. It rose smoothly, spiraling away from the farm. Hamilton, Wall, and Heslop stood in the corral and looked up, unable to move. The object gained altitude to about 200 feet and hovered again. The lights on it went out one by one, leaving only a faint reddish glow from the hull itself. The hum subsided to a barely audible buzz. The men stood and watched. A minute passed, maybe 2. Then the object suddenly shot forward at tremendous speed. It crossed the sky from northwest to southeast in a matter of seconds, turning into a glowing dot and then disappeared over the horizon. The stars became clearly visible again. The hum ceased completely. The air grew quieter. The cows in the pen gradually calmed down, although some were still trembling and breathing heavily. Hamilton got up from the ground. His knees were shaking. He looked around. The lamp he had dropped when he grabbed the heifer was lying in the grass, but the glass was intact and the wick was still burning. Alexander picked it up and looked around the pen. The top rail of the fence was split in 2. Several boards lay on the ground, broken in half. Where the rope had become entangled in the fence, the wood was charred. Hamilton ran his fingers over the blackened boards. They were hot to the touch, as if they had been held over a fire. The smell of smoke hung in the air, mingling with the smell of burnt wool. Wall found a piece of rope or fiber in the grass, about 2 feet long, thin and reddish. He picked it up and showed it to his father. The material was strange, unlike hemp, cotton, or horsehair. It was smooth, almost metallic in appearance, but flexible. When Wall clenched it in his fist, the material heated up and began to glow with a faint red light. The young man threw it on the ground in fear. The fiber lay in the grass for a few seconds. The glow faded, and then the material began to smolder and turn to ash right before the men's eyes. Heslop examined the ground near the broken fence. He found hoofprints from a heifer, deep as if the animal had braced itself with all its might. Next to them, there were strange furrows in the ground, smooth, as if drawn with some kind of tool. The furrows formed a circle, an almost perfect circle with a diameter of about 15 feet. Inside the circle, the grass was flattened and slightly scorched, its leaves yellowed and curled. Alexander told Wall and Heslop to go back to the house and put on warmer clothes, while he stayed in the pen to examine the damage. He walked around the circle of scorched grass several times, trying to figure out what it could be. The ground inside the circle was warm. He could feel it through the soles of his boots. In the center of the circle lay a piece of wood, a piece of the crossbar that Wall had cut down. Alexander picked it up and brought it to his nose. The smell was acrid, chemical, nothing like the usual smell of burnt wood. When his son and the tenant returned, the three men set out to inspect the farm's surroundings. They took lamps and walked around the entire perimeter of the property, checking other buildings and pens. The barn was intact, the chicken coop untouched, and the horses in the stable were nervous but unharmed. They found no other traces of the strange object. The sky was clear and starry, and the wind had died down completely. Hamilton did not sleep until dawn. He sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, and stared at the horizon. Wall and Heslop did not go to bed either. They brought coffee and sat nearby. The men hardly spoke. Alexander tried to make sense of what had happened, but his thoughts were confused. He was a practical man who believed in what could be touched and measured. But what he had seen that night did not fit into any framework. At dawn, Hamilton hitched up his wagon and drove into town. He wanted to report the incident to the sheriff and show the damage to the farm to someone else who could corroborate his story. In Leroy, he found Sheriff William McKay in his office, sorting through papers. McKay was an elderly man, about 60 years old, with a gray mustache and a piercing gaze. He listened to Hamilton silently, without interrupting, and then agreed to come to the farm. On the way, Alexander stopped by several other neighbors. He found William Taylor, the owner of the neighboring farm to the east, and John Heron, who owned a mill a couple of miles to the south. Both men had known Hamilton for many years and were considered honest and respectable people. Alexander briefly told them about the incident and asked them to come and look at the damage. Taylor and Heron exchanged glances but agreed. By noon, a small group had gathered at Hamilton's farm. Sheriff McKay, Taylor, Heron, Alexander himself, his son Wall, and tenant farmer Heslop stood near the ruined corral. McKay examined the broken boards, running his fingers over the charred wood. Taylor studied the circle of scorched grass, measuring it with his steps. Heron picked up a few splinters from the ground and examined them closely. Sheriff McKay asked Hamilton to recount everything from the beginning. Alexander repeated his story, trying not to leave out any details. Wall and Heslop confirmed his words, recounting what they had seen themselves. McKay listened, nodding occasionally. When Hamilton finished, the sheriff was silent for a long time, staring at the sky. Taylor said that he had woken up that night to a strange hum coming from the west. He got up and went out onto the porch, but saw nothing. He only heard a sound like a large machine running. The sound lasted a few minutes and then faded away. Taylor decided it was the wind or one of his neighbors working at night and went back to bed. Now he realized that he had heard the same object that Hamilton had seen. Heron said that around 2 o'clock in the morning, his dogs began to bark and howl. He went out to calm them down, but the dogs were in a state of panic, hiding under the porch and refusing to come out. The miller had never seen them behave like this before. He tried to pull them out, but the animals snapped and whimpered. Heron left them alone, deciding that perhaps a coyote or wild cat was roaming nearby. McKay suggested drawing up a report of the incident and asked everyone present to sign it as witnesses. Hamilton agreed. The sheriff took a notebook and pencil out of his pocket and began to write down the statements. He wrote slowly, choosing his words carefully. When the report was ready, McKay read it aloud. The document stated that on April 19, 1897, an unusual incident occurred on Alexander Hamilton's farm, 3 miles from the town of Leroy. At around midnight, an unidentified cigar-shaped flying object equipped with bright lights hovered over a cattle pen. A glowing red cable descended from the object, wrapped around the neck of a young heifer, and began to lift it into the air. The rope became entangled in the corral fence, damaging the wooden structure and leaving burn marks. After the fence was broken, the object lifted the animal and disappeared in a northwesterly direction. Charred boards, a broken fence, and a circle of burned grass about 15 feet in diameter remained at the scene. McKay handed the notebook to Hamilton, who signed it. Wall and Heslop signed next, followed by Taylor and Herron. The sheriff himself signed last, certifying the document. He said he would send a copy of the report to the county office and try to find out if there had been similar cases elsewhere. A few days later, Hamilton took a copy of the minutes to the editorial office of the local newspaper, the Yates Center Farmers Advocate. The editor, a man named Lowe, read the document carefully and asked Alexander for details. Hamilton answered all his questions. Lowe said he would publish the material in the next issue, as the case was of considerable interest to readers. The article appeared on April 28th. It took up almost an entire page and included the full text of the report with the signatures of the witnesses. Lowe added a few comments of his own, noting that all the people who signed the document were known in the county as honest and trustworthy citizens. The editor also mentioned that in recent years there had been an increase in reports of strange flying objects in various states, and that the Hamilton case could well be one such sighting. The publication caused a wide resonance. Other newspapers in Kansas and neighboring states reprinted the article. Some publications sent their correspondents to Leroy to interview Hamilton and his witnesses. Alexander repeated his story over and over again without changing a single word. Wall and Heslop confirmed every detail. Taylor and Herron recounted what they had heard and seen that night. Many readers wrote letters to the editor offering various explanations for the incident. Some claimed it was an airship or balloon operated by an enthusiastic inventor conducting secret experiments. Others spoke of a natural phenomenon, ball lightning or glowing gas rising from the ground. Still others believed it was something otherworldly, arriving from other planets or other worlds. Hamilton did not argue with any of the theories. He simply repeated the facts. He saw the object. The object abducted his aunt, and physical evidence remained. Alexander did not know what it really was and did not want to speculate. He was a farmer, not a scientist. In the weeks that followed, dozens of people came to Hamilton's farm. Journalists, curious onlookers, skeptics who wanted to see the scene of the incident with their own eyes. Alexander showed them the destroyed fence, which he never repaired, leaving it as evidence. The circle of burnt grass gradually grew over, but its outline was still visible. Hamilton kept the charred boards in his barn, showing them to visitors. Some skeptics expressed doubts about the veracity of the story. They claimed that Hamilton had made it all up for fame or money. Alexander responded calmly, inviting them to talk to witnesses or examine the damage. None of the skeptics could provide a convincing alternative explanation for the charred boards and the burned circle in the grass. The cow was never found. Hamilton rode around the surrounding area for 20 miles, asking neighbors if anyone had seen a dead or injured animal. No one had seen anything. The heifer's body was not found in the fields, the woods, or the river. She disappeared without a trace, just like the object that had abducted her. Several months passed. Public interest gradually faded. Hamilton returned to his usual farm work. He repaired the fence, although he left a few charred boards as a memento. The cows in the pen calmed down and no longer showed signs of fear. Life on the farm returned to normal. However, Alexander could never look at the night sky with peace of mind again. Every time he went out on the porch in the evening, he involuntarily peered into the darkness and listened to the sounds. The roar of the wind in the trees made him shudder. Strange shadows in the clouds seemed suspicious. He didn't talk about it out loud, but Wall and Heslop noticed how their father had become more alert, more cautious. One late autumn day that year, as Hamilton was returning from the field after a day's work, he saw a bright star moving from west to east in the sky. The star was larger and brighter than the others, and it moved slowly but noticeably. Alexander stopped his horse and watched. The star moved in a straight line without twinkling, its light steady and cold. After a few minutes, it disappeared over the horizon. Hamilton didn't tell anyone about it. He didn't know if it was the same object as in April or something else. Perhaps it was just a meteor or a comet. But something inside him told him that it was something else. He returned home, fed his horse, had dinner, and went to bed. But sleep did not come easily. Alexander lay in the dark and thought about what was happening in the world, about the secrets hidden in the sky above his head. In the years that followed, Hamilton's story became part of local folklore. It was told in bars and at fairs, with new details added each time. Some said that the object had returned several times. Others claimed that the kidnapped girl had been seen alive in a neighboring state. Alexander neither denied nor confirmed these rumors. He simply remained silent. Sheriff McKay conducted his own investigation, interviewing county residents and gathering evidence of other unusual sightings that night. Several people confirmed that they had heard strange sounds or seen lights in the sky, but no one except Hamilton had observed the object up close. McKay documented all the testimony and sent a report to the state, but never received a response. Taylor and Heron supported Hamilton's version until the end of their lives. They repeatedly confirmed their signatures on the report and told anyone who would listen that they had seen the damage to the farm with their own eyes. Both men died in the early 1990s without changing their testimony. Wall Hamilton inherited the farm after his father's death in 1910. He continued to run the farm and tell the story of that night to anyone who was interested. Wall kept the charred boards in his barn until the end of his life. After his death in 1932, the boards were donated to a local museum, where they were displayed as evidence of one of the most mysterious cases of the 19th century. Heslop left the farm a few years after the incident and moved to Missouri, where he found work on the railroad. Before leaving, he left a written statement detailing the events of that night. The statement was notarized and kept in the county archives. Alexander Hamilton's story became one of the most documented cases of unidentified flying object sightings in the 19th century. The report, signed by 6 witnesses, newspaper publications, and written statements all made the case unique. Skeptics continued to search for rational explanations, but none of them could fully explain all the details of the incident. Charred boards, a burnt circle in the grass, a strange fiber that burned on its own. All this pointed to the influence of some energy or technology unknown to the science of the time. Some researchers suggested that it was an early form of electricity or magnetism, while others spoke of unknown natural phenomena. But most acknowledged that the case remained unexplained. In the following decades, new reports of similar observations appeared in different parts of the country. Farmers reported missing animals, strange tracks and damage, and flying objects with bright lights. Some of these cases were similar to Hamilton's, others differed in detail, but the overall picture formed a certain pattern. Alexander Hamilton died in 1910 at the age of 73. Before his death, he told his story one last time to the local priest, Father Michael O'Brien. The priest recorded Alexander's story and later published it in the church newsletter. Hamilton repeated all the details exactly as he had told them 13 years earlier. He added nothing new and changed no details. His last words on the subject were, "He saw what he saw and let others decide what it was." Alexander Hamilton's grave is located in the cemetery in Leroy. His name, dates of birth and death, and a short epitaph are engraved on the tombstone. An honest farmer, a loving father, a witness to the unseen. Every year on the anniversary of the incident, a few enthusiasts come to the grave and lay flowers, paying tribute to a man who was not afraid to tell the truth, no matter how strange it might seem. The place where the cattle pen once stood has long been overgrown with grass. The farm has changed owners several times, and the current owners know almost nothing about the events of 1897. But the old-timers remember. They point to a piece of land northwest of the old house and tell the story of the night when a craft descended from the sky and abducted a heifer. The original report, signed by Hamilton, Wall, Heslop, Taylor, Heron, and Sheriff McKay, is still kept in the county archives. The document has yellowed with age, the ink has faded, but the signatures are still legible. Next to the report are newspaper clippings, letters from readers, and photographs of charred boards. All of these are silent testimonies that on April 19, 1897, something happened in the sky above Kansas that neither contemporaries nor descendants could explain. Some say that the Hamilton incident was a hoax, a prank invented for fame or money. But those who have studied the documents and witness statements come to a different conclusion. Too many people have confirmed the story. Too much physical evidence remains. Alexander's account has been too consistent over the course of 13 years. What it really was, an airship from an unknown inventor, a natural phenomenon, or something else entirely, remains a mystery. But one thing is certain. That night, something happened over Hamilton's farm that changed the life of an ordinary farmer and his family. Alexander Hamilton lived out the rest of his days with the feeling that the world was much more complex and mysterious than it seemed. He knew that somewhere out there in the sky, there were things that humans could not understand. And this knowledge both frightened and fascinated him until the very end. This story has no definitive answer. It remains an open mystery, one of the many secrets that surround humanity. Perhaps one day new evidence will be found or new testimony will emerge that will shed light on the events of that night. Or perhaps the truth will remain hidden, like many other secrets witnessed by people throughout the ages. But the very fact that Alexander Hamilton's story was so carefully documented, that 6 people signed the report, that the charred boards were kept in a museum, and that the story was passed down from generation to generation, makes this case unique. It is a reminder that the world is full of the inexplicable, that the boundaries between the known and the unknown are very close, and that sometimes an ordinary farmer from Kansas can encounter something that calls into question everything he has believed before.